Well, that guy turned me out. I started dressing up like a little girl, you know, and my sisters and all of them dressed me up like a girl. I'd get out in the jump rope and play house and all that stuff.
When was the first time that you realized that you were a homosexual, Otis?
Well, I really didn't start understanding it until I was about 10, 11 years old.
Did you ever go out with any girls when you were younger?
Yeah, but I didn't care for it too much.
Why do you burn buildings, Otis? Does that excite you sexually? Or what kind of feeling do you get when you burn a building?
Well, sometimes I get back and masturbate.
Otis, you see, let me see your fingers here. What are these marks on your finger and the hole in your hand there?
Oh, that's where I burnt myself.
How do you burn yourself?
I'll take a cigarette and hold it down against it.
If some detectives came here tomorrow and showed you some crime scenes, would you confess to it?
No. No.
You learned your lesson, huh?
No. Yeah.
You obviously. What would you do if you got out of jail, Otis?
Go right back to Jacksonville.
And do what, Otis?
Get me a job.
You give up the torch, huh?
I ain't gonna say I wouldn't burn down no more buildings, you know.
Otis Toole is currently serving a life sentence for arson murder in Florida State Prison. At this time, he is not eligible for parole. Henry Lee Lucas, who refused to be interviewed, is in Texas State Prison in Huntsville under a death sentence. No execution date has been set. In 1977, Los Angeles again was to experience another series of brutal murders. This time, young women, some believed to be prostitutes, were murdered and their naked bodies discarded on hillsides near freeway on-ramps. This series of killings would now become known as the Hillside Strangler case. The killings went on for about a year and then suddenly stopped. A similar murder in Bellingham, Washington, almost a year later, led to the immediate arrest of a security guard by the name of Kenneth Bianchi. Bianchi, in turn, led authorities to his cousin Angelo Bono in Glendale, California. What was to follow was one of the most elaborate and ingenious hoaxes in criminal history. Bianchi, with an IQ of 120, was to convince several prominent psychiatrists that he was indeed a true multiple personality. He claimed that his alter ego Steve had committed these crimes. At this time, the prosecution called in Dr. Martin Orne, a leading authority on hypnosis from the University of Pennsylvania, to evaluate Bianchi. Dr. Orne, in his examination of Bianchi, concluded that the multiple personality defense was indeed a hoax. This caused Mr. Bianchi to abandon the multiple personality defense, and he was to plead guilty to 7 murders. In Philadelphia, at the Institute of Pennsylvania Hospital, Dr. Martin Orne was interviewed by his associate, Dr. David Dinges, on his involvement in the Bianchi case. Dr. Orne comments on the only filmed interview that Ken Bianchi ever permitted.
Well, in the case of Bianchi, you had to decide whether or not he was a multiple personality, as he appeared to be, or whether he was a sexual psychopath, which also accounted for all of the evidence we had about him. And one of the things about multiple personalities is that they have to exist before you examine the patient. They don't just come during the examination. And one of the things that multiple personalities complain about is loss of memory. They don't recognize somebody, and they do things which they can't explain. They lose time. And no one had ever seen or heard of Mr. Bianchi having this kind of a response. He didn't do it.
In this rare black and white footage, we see Kenneth Bianchi attempt to exhibit the multiple personalities.
And what I want you to do, take your coffee, whatever it is, and then just kind of sit back in the chair. You want me to sit back on
Yes.
the chair? sort of wondering why that feeling of uncomfortableness. And perhaps I could know a little more why that uncomfortableness is there. Yes.
Guess what? Hi.
Hi. Are you Ken?
Do I look like Ken?
Well, no. Do you know who I am?
Sure, I know you are.
Okay. You're a little disturbed with me.
So what?
Okay. We just understand each other.
I don't like you. I don't like you at all.
Well, why don't you like me, Ken? Pardon me. It isn't Ken, is it?
No, it's not. It's Steve.
Oh, okay.
Sometime after my arrest, there were allegations that I may have had a multiple personality. I was approached by someone, and he said, "We have a problem here." He said, "It appears you might have a multiple personality."
The person they got in gave him the opportunity to come out as a multiple personality, as it were. And he tried his very best to convince me also that he was a multiple personality. He was successful with several psychiatrists because he was so good at picking up what really the psychiatrist thought he ought to be, and was very compelling. And of course now he says it never really happened. I wasn't a multiple, and somebody told me to do this. But when I saw him, he was doing his level best to convince me.
But the one element that it seems to be missing is most multiples are abused as children. He says, "Can you think of anything in your childhood?" Well, you have to, I don't even today fully understand my state of mind just after my arrest, but you have to understand that I was in a different state of mind, and I said, I remember one incident where my mother threatened to put my hand over a stove. I had started a fire or something, and she never turned on the stove. But that incident, even though it was not traumatic, has taken on a life of its own and grown in proportions, and that has been the seed for all the allegations that I was abused as a child, primarily. And I was not abused as a child. I really was not.
What things would tend to make you angry?
People being, believe it or not, people being cruel. People not being understanding would upset me. I can almost, but not quite, imagine that taking a human life has to be a horrendous thing. It can't be something that was done with conscience as we know it.
You want to know which ones... See, I got your case.
Okay.
You want to know which ones Angelo and I did away?
If you want
You
to
think
tell
I'm
me
not going to tell you, huh?
I don't know whether you're going to tell me or not.
Huh?
I don't know whether you're going to tell me or not.
My decision, isn't it?
I guess it is.